Hello and welcome to the MCTC Anime Club. I am Crimson Lord.
Go accept the Green Knight at your service.
Fifi.
And the Poetry Ninja.
I think he lost his ninja outfit though.
I decided to dress for the occasion for the anime that we watched today.
And it is a very special review as pertaining to the anime we watched. This week we watched Death Parade.
And Death Parade is kind of a weird, dramatic occultish kind of anime where we have our main character Decim, who hosts a bar known as the Quindecim, where folks come in, play games to decide their fates for their life, and I will just leave it at that. But it's a very interesting storyline. The way I kind of describe it to people, because it's one of my favorite kind of shows, if you've ever seen The Twilight Zone, it pretty much has that kind of storyline writing. You have your one episode that kind of tells its own story as a whole. Granted, Death Parade has this overarching story that is happening overall, but each episode seems to deal with every single person that comes into the Quindecim, and it's a different story for everybody. Some people are lost and have no idea who they are. Some people have an idea of who they are, but they're not quite sure exactly how they got there. And then you have some folks that have an idea of what's going on and they're just kind of nonchalantly playing it. But as the games progress for each character, you start to see the darker sides of each one, and you eventually find out as to why they're there. But I'll just leave it at that because there's a lot of explanation to each episode, and if I told you exactly why those characters were there, I would be basically ruining Decim's job, which is not to say why they're there.
So basically, spoilers.
But if I had to sum it up, I would say that most of the episodes are each varying a game with high stakes. I won't mention what I mean by that, because again, that would be a spoiler.
Let's just say this, you're betting it all.
That's one way of putting it. Now then, since we described the anime, we'll move on to the characters, such as our bartender, Decim.
And Decim is
Kind of a blank slate.
well, when you're kind of this judge for the game that is taking place, you don't really want to show any sort of emotion, because overall this is not just a game. I'll just say it's a judgment on character, which overall pretty much sums up why he almost has no emotion, which sets him really well as a character. But there's also a little bit of emotion for him too when things don't quite go as well as he had hoped, because sometimes his judgment doesn't go the way that he was hoping it would, and it ends up not being the overall best outcome.
Actually, if I can add on to that, I think you made a slight error there, Poetry. You said he doesn't put a lot of emotion into his job. I think the actual problem, he is emotionless.
That is true too. But when you're in that sort of position, you don't want to show any sort of emotion. He doesn't show it until much later when he realizes that things aren't quite as great as he had hoped. But you also have to realize that Decim has been doing this for quite a while. He's seen a lot of people come and go through the Quindecim. He's seen all sorts of different results, but he's never truly discovered anything until he finds his assistant, which we'll move on to the next character.
And we were just going to refer to her as the assistant because her name is not known, and for any of those who have seen more episodes than the 4 we've watched, we will not say anything else. I'm not trying to imply anything.
No, it's true. Now, that's another thing too about me, is that I haven't actually seen the entirety of the series. I've seen about maybe half. But overall, yeah, her name is not known, not even by any of the characters overall. Deckham doesn't know her name. I forget her name.
No?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Nona.
I started thinking now we had not from Fire Emblem. I just started laughing. I'm sorry.
I think her name's pronounced Nona.
Yes.
I
Nona.
thought that was the
No, it's-
white-haired girl.
No, that's what
that
he
is
was
the one.
talking about.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the other.
No, we're not talking about the assistant yet.
Okay.
It's not Na or Naui. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I
No,
forget,
it's like a
it's the
minute.
third character, the one who's usually smiling and his eyes closed, the elevator attendant. What's his name again?
I don't think we really got a name for him, and there's not really much to say about him because
Yeah.
he's just kind of an elevator man that's just kind of like, oh, so how's your day going? Oh, how'd it go in there? You know, the kind of typical thing that some guy that's operating an elevator all day would do. Like,
Well,
Yeah,
from
you
the
see a lot
one
of
scene
people
that
in-
we saw,
Yeah, he
we
didn't
don't
really
know
make
if
much
there's
of an,
anything more.
He didn't make much of an appearance. The more you could just say is so far he's the nicest character in the anime.
Considering he's probably got more emotion than Deckham.
I'm pretty sure everyone has more emotions than Deckham.
No offense to the guy.
This table has more emotion than Deckham.
I have to say, no offense to Deckham, but I would call him dense, but I think that'd be too fair.
no, I wouldn't even call him dense either. The way I've been already saying about Deckham's character is that he's emotionless because he doesn't really need or have the right to show any emotion because as his position as a judge for these games, he can't really tell anything to any of the people participating, as he states in the beginning of each game, that he can't say what's going on. He can't say why they're there. He can't say how they got there, and he can't really have them do anything else but play this game in order to decide their overall fate as who is going to win and who is going to lose. I won't say anything
This
more
is
than
making me
that.
start. It's kind of making me start thinking of the start of Persona 5.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Crimson Notcha?
Well, either way, despite that fact, it doesn't make the events of the episode any lighter in the mood. They're kind of intense as they progress.
Yeah,
Especially
it's-
episode 2.
It's kind of like how I had already said when I'm explaining the series to a lot of people. It very much has a Twilight Zone-esque kind of vibe with its writing and its storytelling. There's all these different story points with all of these characters that are coming to the Quindecum to play games. And as the series progresses, you kind of figure out exactly why the Quindecum exists and why these characters are playing their games and how they got there and who they really were and what really was going to be their overall fate for them. In the end, the wonderful thing about it is that you also sort of take that job as Deckham and the assistant of really trying to figure out, was that the right option? Was that the right judgment on those characters? What was the true overall story? And was it fair? Or was it the right answer / conclusion?
Like the first episode is a perfect example of that.
Mhm.
It shows that right out of the bat. We meet these two characters. I'm blanking on their names, but we're not going to mention much about. And basically, throughout we keep getting a back and forth. We find out parts of the information, and even in the end, we're unsure of what happens. That's one of the only examples we see is the next episode links back to the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like what happens behind the scenes.
Yeah, because we see it from Deckham's point of view, but episode 2 gives us the assistants.
And also kind of gives a better explanation for both of the characters that were participating for the game. So you take this side of seeing it from the initial point, and then you deal with the shock, and then the second episode takes a look at it from a different perspective and sort of explains it a little bit better, because in that first episode, you don't really quite know the exact truth of the characters that participated in the game. But in the second episode, you kind of take that stance of looking at the two characters that participated and see their true emotions and memories. And then you also take that point sort of at the end of that episode as the assistant and Deckham and really trying to figure out was that the right judgment? Was that the right outcome for both of those characters? Was it? Yeah.
With the assistant, we don't even know if she's right. It's just speculation.
Well, anyway.
Right, so did we talk about all the characters? 'Cause
I think so.
Yeah.
That we got
pretty much.
introduced to.
Did we pretty much say much about the Nonon, or the fuck that
Yeah.
her name is?
Yeah,
I think she just seems like the person in charge of the whole place.
Alright, I want,
yeah, I kind of see her as like the boss of Quinn Deckham. So she
or
kind
at
of
least
keeps.
Deckham's boss.
Yeah, she keeps order for Deckham and makes sure that he's doing his job right.
I don't
And-
think it's just Deckham. I think she may be the boss of the entire place, wherever it is.
Mm.
Because
It's not, we don't know enough information. She's another character who we don't get too much focus on, but we get enough focus. She gets more Karis than Elevator Guy.
But still, that's what you saw in the second episode. It looks like the scenery of the entire series doesn't confine to just that bartender's room and the elevators.
Yeah.
It's possible, especially since I'm guessing those elevators, there's multiple floors, and
Yeah.
from what we saw with episode 5's the end credit scene that speculates what the next episode shows us the next episode, there seemed to be another one of the whatever the heck Deckham and her name is,
The
because he has that
assistant.
same. No, not the assistant.
Oh.
No,
No, I don't know why I keep slipping my mind, because the guy in his credits he had the same eyes as Deckham.
Yeah, there's something else going on, and that's something else that I love about the intrigue for the show, because when you're writing different storylines, especially for series, you want to make sure that you have something that's at least intriguing. You don't want to give away too much at the very beginning, because if you do that, then the story becomes stale and predictable. So the way Death Parade has set itself up is, again, it adds that Twilight Zone-esque storytelling along with this overarching storyline that kind of gives you this mystery and intrigue of finding out, so why are they really playing these games? Why is this judgment being taken upon itself? And I won't say, well, we've all been trying to not say too much about it, but I will also say that there's a lot of different things involving the Buddhist religion. There's a lot of imagery of no masks, there's even Buddha, and there's even the lotus flower that's also introduced as well. And if you even watch the opening scene with the animation, the song, flyers, you see a few different points that link up to the Buddhist faith that also kind of tells you a little bit more about the series, but I'll just leave it at that, and you'll kind of discover it as you're watching the show even further.
Anyway,
All right,
moving
negative.
moving on to the positives, what would you say would be that's good about the show?
We kind of pretty much just got into that.
Yeah, I
Oh.
think the biggest positive point is the storyline and how it's told, because you can tell all these sorts of stories any way you like, but the way this is set up, it has this individual aspect, so each episode doesn't seem like you necessarily have to see the other one beforehand, but you also want to kind of backtrack and make sure that you put the pieces together.
Well, actually, I was asking about the positives again because I feel like the three of us have been talking. We haven't been giving our fourth member any chance to speak.
Well,
Take a shot, Vivi.
positives for me. Well, I mean, so when this anime first came out, it definitely made, an impact, as they all do when they first come out. And I didn't watch it when it first came out, and I tried to watch it on my own. And, oh my gosh, I'm rambling, I'm sorry. I don't know, positives for me, the character design is really creative. They all have their own look and personality and story. The opening is always a hit. I've seen it on many, top 10 lists.
They flashed the fairy tale symbol.
Yeah.
Gotta let that go, man.
That's all I can think of for now, I guess, because we didn't get to see a lot of it. I guess character development for the side characters, you know, the souls that
Monsters of the
come
week.
in.
Yeah.
They kind of fall in. They kind of fall into that idea. Sorry, not to
No,
cut you
you're
off.
fine.
Like the Gets, they kind of fall into that idea, like Monster of the Week. Oh, you know, like there's always a random opponent or something that they end up facing. But that kind of fits in the story. Like it doesn't come across as like, oh, bad guy tries to attack you randomly. No, because it's
Mhm.
goes into the story well. Makes me kind of feel a little mean for
No.
calling them monsters.
Still, you're right. The guests that show up at the Quinn Deckham are kind of random. They sometimes know each other. They're sometimes related. Hell, sometimes they're just completely random people who don't know each other but have a common similarity to how they ended up here.
I think episode 4 might have been an example of that.
Mhm.
Might have been.
Alright,
Anyway,
so I guess
downsides. Any at all?
episode 4.
we didn't get to finish. We kept buffering, so we didn't get to get any further.
Yeah, we
that's-
watched the
that's not
episode a
the
little-
series'
Oh.
fault either.
And we kind of watched it a little late because normally we get maybe a little farther than 4 episodes.
Yeah.
Because we started watching at maybe like 2:30 instead of.
Yeah.
We had a little later of a start, so. But-
Yeah. That was probably our bad on that part.
Yeah.
But it is a special day for one of our members in the chat today.
Oh,
That's right,
I'm
it's
turning
Poetry
another
Ninja's
year
birthday
older.
today. So
Well, yeah. I mean, as of making this video at the moment, it's not officially my birthday, but in a couple of days from this point, it will be my birthday. So whether you're watching this on the day of, or after, or before, it's my birthday. Yay!
Go wish him a happy birthday in the comments.
Yeah.
Do
Wow.
it.
all right. As for any other negatives,
For me personally, I did like what they did with the side character story, but it also made it just a bit of
fractured.
and just screwing with your mind. And they did resolve issues, but they also made you kind of mush the issues together on your own. But that was just also kind of a personal thing, but it made it cool in its own way. So
Maybe it's the show's way of having the audience try to piece together how this all happened.
yeah.
You know, like sort of a puzzle sort of thing. Like,
Mhm.
well, we're nearing the end. Do you know how they ended up here?
Yeah.
That's the vibe I kept getting at the end of every episode.
I think it's part of the like. Jasmine, I get why you're saying it does make it a little confusing. Like I had that same little confusion with episode 3, like exactly what was going on. But they do at least try to explain it. They try to make it clear. I think like episodes 1 and 2, the only one the story is a little iffy.
Yeah.
But I would say if we're moving on from this topic, we have much more.
I have one.
Yes?
Now,
Does
you've all heard my praise of this series.
Uh-huh.
You've all heard how much I enjoy this series.
Sure do.
But if I did have to have one negative point for it, it would actually be for the assistant and Nona. I almost feel like they almost don't really need to be in the story, but then again, there is a point for them, but I won't say what. But it's not a huge negative. It's just,
Is it a point? Well, that was also not what I was talking. I thought I was talking about the mind point, but what I was going to say is that something that could possibly be showing up past? Like you said, you've only seen half the episodes, and from the 4 episodes we saw, we didn't see too much of them. But I feel like there is more to their story. But
Yeah.
what my point was going to be is episode 4. My negative is, well, they make it clear one person's story is more clear. I think the other character's story is a little harder to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say more, but I don't want to go into. So my negatives, they got to try to balance the character's story well enough. Because, like I
Yeah,
said,
'cause
I don't want to say more because I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, because I'll be honest, the first 2 episodes are like a sort of front, center stage and backstage sort of gimmick, whereas the next 2 talk more about like the entire situation of the Quinn Deckham and not exactly about who the characters are or where they come from.
Or like even other. I'm not sure if you just said this because your wording was weird, but the
Yes,
3.
Poetry Ninja?
We're gonna finish it up right. No, just slow your roll. Come on, speed's my business. All right. So what was I say? Like the third episode, like, while we don't get clear from both characters' story, we do get a clear idea, and they do explain it enough. But my issue with the fourth one is the characters are a little discontinued with their story. As Crimson mentioned, they don't know each other, and like the whole idea seems rather odd.
I don't know. Episode 3 was probably one of the more favorites of my taste because, I mean, I admit it's a little lighter in the drama department, but it's pretty good.
I was talking about episode 4. I was using episode 3 as a different example. All right, I think that's all we can say about negatives. Let's go on to scoring. Crimson, start us off.
Well, I personally watched the entire series, so I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5.
I'll give it a 5 out of 5 guests.
I'll give it a 4 out of 4 cocktails.
You mean 4 out of 5?
Yes, sorry, 4 out of 5.
And if I could, 5.5 martinis shaken, not stirred, out of 5.
So practically, so rounded out, I would say it's 19.5, and wow, that's practically an A scoring for this series.
Practically an A.
It is.
Four scores.
Well, it's not exactly a perfect one if we don't get full points.
But it got. You said what was it? You
Hey,
said the
it's
score?
got an A.
Learn your math, Crimson. All right, son.
Well, anyway, that's all we have for today. Join us next week when we'll be watching the movie Steam Boy, and we hope to see you next week.
Bring the water and fire.
Right. Either way, this is the MCTC Club signing off.